Recording. Brilliant. Right. Cool. Over to you, Marilia.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining tonight on our talk about gut health. My name is Marilia. I am a registered nutritional therapist and functional medicine practitioner, specializing in gut health, IBS and SIBO. I came to nutritional therapy as a result of my own health journey, and I decided to specialize in gut health because I suffered with chronic digestive symptoms for nearly a decade and no one could help me out. So I decided to take the matter into my own hands, which is what a lot of people that struggle with digestive symptoms do. But then obviously I went down the road of studying and really getting into the details of how everything works. So I was invited to talk about the gut, how it works, why it's important, and tips on how to improve our gut health. So I think we need to take a step back and just think about what is the gut and how it works, and so we can move on to the next topics. So obviously the gut is part of one of the organs that make part of our digestive system, and it connects us with the outside world. That's what we really need to think about, because whenever we eat, we are bringing something from the outside to the inside, and it's this connection that it's so important for our health, and we'll come to that later on. The job of the gut is supported by the stomach, the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas. So we really need to think about this whole digestive system. The gut is divided in two parts, the small intestine and the large intestine. The small intestine is 7 meters long, which is a really absurd a number if we think about that this fits inside us, but it's all curled up. So that's why it is so long and it fits. And the large intestine is 1.5 meters long. So if you think about, they do take quite a lot of space. And we now know the importance of this whole system that we have in our gut that we'll talk more about later. So as I mentioned, it is important to think about the entire digestive system, which starts in our mouth and finishes at the other end. And it includes the esophagus, the stomach, the small intestine, large intestine, and the pancreas, gallbladder, and liver are there helping everything to work as synergistically as possible. So digestion starts in the mouth. We chew our food, produce saliva that contains enzymes and help break down food. Food then passes through the esophagus and reaches the stomach. The stomach releases acid to help break down food into smaller particles. And the next step is, of course, the absorption of nutrients from the foods that we ate. So proteins, fat, vitamins, minerals. And that's all assisted by the pancreas, which is releasing bile and helping things be absorbed and broken down, such as fats. And whatever we cannot absorb in the small intestine moves down to the large intestine. And that is ultimately dietary fiber, because we as humans do not produce the enzymes to break down dietary fiber, and we need the assistance of our gut bacteria to do that. So that's when it gets exciting, because why is it that gut health is so important, and why is it that it's being talked about so much lately? Previously, we thought that fiber breakdown was the only important mechanism that was happening in the large intestine. So we ate, we absorbed whatever we needed, whatever we don't need, it's going down to the large intestine and then it's eliminated. But now we know that it's does so much more than that, and there's so much more importance to it. So our large intestine is host to at least 100 trillion living microorganisms from 1,000 different species that make up what is called the gut microbiome. Those microorganisms represent one of the most metabolically active systems in the human body, and their activities are extremely important, not just for our gut health and digestive health, but for our overall health. So as basic functions, if we think the importance of the gut microbiome, we think about the fact that they modulate the gut motility and function. They reinforce the gut barrier, which is our first line of defense from all the foods and things that we're drinking and eating throughout the day. You know, as I mentioned in the beginning, this connection with the outside world. So the gut barrier is our first line of defense. It protects us against harmful microorganisms, so opportunistic bacteria, you know, things that can come, you know, in contaminated food or water. It synthesizes vitamins. It educates our immune system, which is the most incredible thing. Without our gut microbiome, we just don't have an immune system that is aware of what to do. And it also controls blood sugar levels, regulates metabolism, and influences our mood via the gut-brain axis. These are just some of the things that the gut microbiome is responsible for. You know, it's now considered like the control center of the body, so it's really involved in pretty much every function in the body. So the key point about the gut microbiome is that diversity is king. So we want to have a diverse combination of gut bacteria, because when this diversity is decreased is when we become more susceptible to a number of diseases. So we want to have a lot of different bugs there, different species, different strains. The easiest way to achieve that, you know, most people think it's a hard thing to support the health of our gut. You need expensive foods or expensive supplements or things like that, but it's really much more simpler. Number one thing is to eat the rainbow. Research suggests that we eat 30 to 40 different plant foods per week, because that brings a diversity of fiber and also diversity of bacteria to the gut. So thinking about that thing that I said earlier, the diversity is the most important component. The more varied is your diet, the more diversity of gut bacteria you will have. 30 sounds like a daunting number, you know, oh my God, how am I gonna eat 30 different things in a week? But you really need to think that, you know, different types of apple contribute to that diversity. So it's not just different foods, but different varieties also help. And obviously, if you think about adding different colors to your plate, it's very easy to build a meal with 7 or 8 different plants in one go. So it's not that hard. Or, you know, buying like canned or mixed beans or mixed lentils, this is all really helpful to contribute to that plant diversity. Another easy way to support the health of our gut is to eat fermented foods. Fermented foods are having a time now. They are so much in vogue, you know, everyone is talking about it because they are full of probiotics, which is live bacteria. And so things like sauerkraut, kimchi, kefir, yogurt. And the reason why they are being so talked about is because they contain this live bacteria that is also a way of bringing diversity to the gut. So when we're thinking about eating the rainbow, we're thinking about different fibers, different colors that feed the gut bacteria. And then when we're talking about the fermented foods, we're talking about the introduction of different bacteria types. So it's important when we're talking about eating the rainbow to also consider fibers that are prebiotic, which means they serve as food for our gut bacteria. So things like garlic, onions, leeks, beans, pulses, they all have fermentable fibers that are prebiotic and feed our gut bacteria. And it's really important to do so because if we don't feed them, they do disappear. So they have their preferred foods. And if we're not having this variety, eventually they can just disappear from our gut ecosystem. And that will contribute to less diversity, which is what we don't want to happen. And then not focusing on food alone, but on lifestyle and, you know, strategies that we can implement to improve our gut health. Sleep, obviously, it's probably the most underrated healthy habit. No one is talking about sleep enough, but that is just the most important thing, is when the body heals. Lack of sleep impacts the gut microbiome in a really negative way. It does contribute to imbalances and, to decrease in diversity of bacteria. So sleep is really important. Moderate exercise has shown to increase bacterial diversity. So that's something we all can do, exercise 30 minutes a day, let's say. Being outdoors is another way. We're breathing from the air, so obviously we're breathing pollution, but we're also breathing so many different microorganisms, so much different bacteria. So that's an easy way as well to support the health of your gut. Manage stress. We talked about stress so much lately, and it does have a great impact in the health of our gut. It does decrease the diversity of gut bacteria, but it also impacts our entire digestive system. So if we are stressed, we are in a fight or flight mode, and our body perceives that as a dangerous situation. So you wouldn't be sitting down to eat a meal while you are under stress, because from the body's point of view, these two things just don't go together. And then because of that, we just are not producing enough stomach acid. We are not able to break down food, and that can create all sorts of digestive symptoms. So managing stress is so important. And I know we cannot avoid stress, but we can see how we can manage it. We can deal with it in a better way. So if we can do things like yoga, meditation, or deep breathing, anything that works for you to lower your stress levels, that is really one of the most important things, equally as important as sleep and eating a variety of foods. And then obviously there are things like taking antibiotics and medications, because those have also really big impact in the gut microbiome, especially antibiotics. The research suggests that it can cause irreversible damage. So the analogy is like, you take one antibiotic and you're thinking, okay, I can take a probiotic supplement to make up for that damage. But we're thinking about, you emptied a pool and now you're dropping one drop of water by taking the probiotics. So it's by no means as simple as that. So obviously antibiotics have their place, but it's really important to consider that we need to take them only when it's absolutely necessary. And the same with other medications, even the birth control pill, things like that also alter the diversity of gut bacteria. So it's really about our modern lifestyle, and the things that we're doing on a daily basis that can have such an impact on our gut health. And then obviously we cannot forget about gut infections. So things like food poisoning, which is a common thing, unfortunately, most of us have gone through this at least once. And that can also be the trigger to digestive symptoms, because it does create a disruption in the gut microbiome. So if we think about the most common condition when we think about gut bacteria imbalance, is irritable bowel syndrome, and usually gut infections such as food poisoning is the root cause of that. So that's something that it's not often talked about, but it is a really important point. Lestat also asked me to just touch on the common causes of gut imbalance, which is, as I said, how to support it. So eating the rainbow, fermented foods, fermentable fibers, sleeping, and practicing some stress management techniques, because all of those contribute to this imbalance. And especially if we think about an ultra-processed diet, high in inflammatory fats, additives, preservatives, all these things also contribute. It contributes to the lack of diversity if it's eaten in the long term. a low fiber diet, circadian rhythm disruption, so not enough sleep, chronic stress. As I mentioned, the things that we can do to support our gut health are the things that, create this imbalance in the first place. And it's difficult to think like about gut health, not associating it with digestive symptoms, because I think the main reason people think about the gut is like because they start to have digestive symptoms. So the most common being probably like gas, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, or getting a diagnosis of irritable bowel syndrome. But the gut is so intrinsically connected to the whole body that there are other things that we can pay attention to that could be related to an imbalance of gut bacteria, but it's not necessarily presented as digestive symptoms. So food intolerances, nutritional deficiencies, autoimmune conditions, skin irritations, acne, anxiety and depression. That is a big one that is so connected to the health of our gut. Sugar cravings, hormonal imbalances. So there are so many symptoms that are associated with it, because as I discussed earlier, the gut microbiome is just responsible for so many functions in the body. So we can't really separate these two things. But I hope, this brought some great information to you with the basics of gut health. I think, there's a lot more to talk about, but I try not to overwhelm my clients or my audience, because I think we need to take a step back and kind of digest everything that is being mentioned here. So just really try to apply the basics, of looking after your gut health in a simple way. And then obviously, if none of them are enough, and let's say you are struggling with digestive symptoms and you think that there is more to it, look for a healthcare professional, be it a GP or a nutritionist, nutritional therapist, dietitian, that can then help you understand the root cause of your problem and see what you can do to make it better.
Nice. Thank you very much. Lots of questions, lots of interesting bits. Yeah. One that jumps out, you talk about like having diversity in your diet day to day. Yeah. I eat the same breakfast every day forever. It's a good breakfast. It's got loads of nuts, chia seeds. It's got lots of good in. I've had the same breakfast for probably every day for 6 years. Wow. Is that really bad for the gut? Even though, I've started having the same lunch. Even though they're both good lunch, it's a good lunch and a good breakfast, and there's probably lots of diverse things in it. But yeah, is that? Yeah. Awesome?
No, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily bad. Especially like if it's whole foods, colors and different plants. It's not a bad thing, but as I said, what brings the diversity is really the diversity of food. So if you can perhaps, have the base, let's say the same, and then add different, I don't know what it involves, but if it's a porridge, for example, add different toppings, or even like changing the base sometimes is simpler than we think, so something that I always suggest to my clients, instead of just buying oats to make your porridge, buy a mix of different grains, so have oats, have rice flakes, millet flakes, quinoa flakes. That's already 4 different things in one porridge base. Yeah. And then you can vary the toppings throughout the week, and rotate the seeds, the nuts and things like that. So it's not that it's necessarily bad. It won't create any harm. It's not like eating a highly processed diet. Yeah. But if we're thinking about diversity, we want to reach those 32 different plant foods per week. And obviously, if we can rotate, create a bit of variation, not having the same ones every week, that's the idea. That's the whole point behind it.
Cool. I will be looking for new bases.
And the same for lunch, So if you can vary as well, that's a great idea. So as I said, like think about buying mixed beans, mixed vegetables, mixed salad leaves, all that can provide at least 3 to 4 different plants in one single package. So it makes it much easier.
Nice. Cool. Really interesting. How common are gut, like not problems, but how common is it for someone to have a gut deficiency or problem of some sort? Is it quite widespread, or like, because
it is really, really common. Yeah. It's more common than we think. I think well, we know numbers, for example, for irritable bowel syndrome, it's estimated 1 in every 5 people in the UK.
Really? Wow.
And that's, you know, the ones that get a diagnosis. So we also need to think about the ones that don't, and people that live with chronic digestive symptoms and just think that that's normal, so they don't look for help. That part as well. So it is something really common worldwide. Actually, it's, I think, the number 2 reason why people visit the GP is because of gastrointestinal symptoms.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's something that it's like very much out there, and luckily now we're just talking about it more. So, you know, hopefully people that are struggling with any sort of symptom are like trying to look for help.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because when you were talking about it being like a potential cause of anxiety, acne, stress, etc., if I was anxious, I wouldn't think initially that gut health could ever be causing it. So yeah, it's interesting that it can cause that.
Yeah, so because basically the gut is connected to the brain via the gut-brain axis, and is a two-way communication highway, really. So for every message that the brain sends down to the gut actually sends 9 up to the brain.
Wow.
So this communication is so intense. And if you think that, you know, if your gut is unhappy, if there is a lack of diversity of bacteria, if there is an imbalance, if you have some sort of gut infection, there is no way that the gut is not going to communicate that to the brain. Obviously, it's not a straightforward communication. It's through neurons and metabolites, but it's a biochemistry situation going on. So it's really impossible to separate them.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting. And does the communication go both ways? So obviously the gut impacts the brain, but then can your brain impact your gut? So
yes,
like
definitely. Yeah. The brain can impact the gut because it's a two-way communication. And as I mentioned, you know, stress, for example, is something that impacts obviously the whole body. We know that it's probably the opening door to every chronic condition in the 21st century. But when it comes to the gut, and when it comes to the gut as well, you know, if we are in this fight or flight mode, we're stressed, everything stops, digestion stops, and the motility of the gut is also compromised, and that contributes to an imbalance in the gut bacteria. So it is very intrinsically connected. So it's important to look after our gut health, like thinking about the gut bacteria, our microbes, but we also need to think about our mental health because they are both connected, and one can lead to an imbalance in the other.
Yeah, definitely.
The question here is like, what started first, you know, the gut issue or the stress issue?
And what do you think? Do you have a view?
I think it depends on the person, you know. I would say for most people, probably stress is the major trigger.
Yeah.
And probably that is the number 1 cause for digestive symptoms, but it's not for everyone. So for example, someone that has had an episode of food poisoning, the digestive symptoms can start after that. And then, you know, that will present as a scenario where the gut is overly sensitive and starts to send this wrong communication to the brain where, you know, saying that there is a problem. So it really depends on the context, on the person, and, you know, their lifestyle, their diet, and everything else.
Cool. All really interesting. Kirsty, any questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Oh.
Well, I had quite a few, and I think you've kind of covered most of it, to be fair. I'm very much like you. I have the same thing. I'm a bit monotonous, and maybe I should branch out a little bit. But it's kind of related to that same thing. When you were talking about, and forgive me if I've got my words the wrong way around, the like gut bacteria, and you said that they can deteriorate if obviously you don't satisfy them with the right nutrients. Can you build them back?
Yeah. So basically, it's not. We need to feed them with the right fibers. So that's why the diversity of food is important, because we're thinking about having different fibers. You know, things like vegetables have specific fibers, beans, pulses, fruits, nuts, seeds. So we really need to think about that. If we are not bringing the diversity, certain species may disappear because we're just not feeding them the food that they eat. And you can absolutely reestablish this balance back. but it's not necessarily straightforward and, you know, the easiest thing and for everyone, because obviously if they are missing, you need to think, okay, you need to bring a probiotic supplement, so you are bringing the bacteria back, but you then need to also feed that bacteria with the right ingredients so they actually set up residence again in the gut, you know. And that's something I go through a lot with my clients, you know. As a functional medicine practitioner, I do a lot of microbiome analysis, and then we can understand like what is it that's going on in the gut, what is missing, so what is it that we need to bring back. But it is absolutely possible to do so, and I would say that the easiest way to do that is to have a varied diet, because then whatever you're missing, you know, if you expand what you eat, you're just bringing the diversity back.
That's really helpful. Thank you. It's so amazing that even though you're not doing necessarily what your body needs, it can still recover and move forward. And it's just fascinating.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you know, I think the body is such a clever machine, and it's always there to work with us. Although sometimes we think it's working against us, but it's never. It's doing everything that it can to survive, and that it can definitely it can change so quickly to the worse and the better.
Cool.
Thank you.
No problem.
One more for me. I was just thinking it might be really interesting actually, just to hear. You mentioned when you work with your clients that you do an analysis of the microbiome. Yeah. I think it'd be really interesting. Like, what does that analysis look like? So if a client comes with you, works with you, like, what is that process? I wouldn't even know.
So that is, we run a stool test, and it's not like a commercial direct to consumer test. You know, I know that there are lots of those that you can buy online. Yeah. And there is such a big debate, you know, that those are not valid because there is no science behind it. And I totally get the point, you know, that other health professionals are making on that, because they are direct to consumer, and they are like superficial in a way, because they're just telling you, okay, eat more broccoli, or, you know, eat less potato, for example. Yeah. But the ones that we run, you know, that are the ones that you get through clinicians, they're so much more detailed than that. And there's the whole clinical literature involved, that we know microbial patterns and things like that. So it's a stool test that does the sequencing of the microbiome, just like a PCR, like we do for COVID testing. And then we can, we learn, you know, the quantities of the gut bacteria, and, you know, if certain crucial species are missing, if we have too much of the opportunistic ones and too little of the good ones. So it gives us a panel of what's going on. And it's not necessarily like good and bad, it's the context that is so important. So it gives us this insight of what's happening inside the gut, and we can understand, you know, okay, so, you know, there are key species that are missing, they're so important for XYZ reason. So what can we do to bring them back to the gut? Just like Christy asked, you know, what can we do to bring them back? What foods can we focus on? What fibers can we focus on? So it's a really incredible tool, really, really amazing. And I see really great results whenever I get that done with clients. Nice.
Cool. That's everything from me. Kirsty, anything else? Final bits to ask? Oh, is he gone?
No. Sorry, no, I am here. Sorry, my husband just called me just to tell me he was finishing work. Sorry.
That's okay.
No, I think you've pretty much covered everything that I had, even in the presentation. It was, phenomenal to hear so many different things about something that does so much that we take for granted, really. Yeah. So, just no other questions from me, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, Marilia. That's very kind and very interesting. And speak soon.
Anytime. Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Cool. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.